Hey everyone, this is a clip from a recent episode of the Men of Steel podcast, where we talk about Superman and Superman-adjacent topics. If you enjoy this clip, check out the podcast. You can find it at certainpov.com or wherever you get your shows. Superman 149, The Imaginary Story by Jerry Siegel and Curt Swan, that was the death of Superman. Like, it's the cover is the death of Superman. We're not burying the lead on this one. Like everyone knew, 10 cents are getting the death of Superman.
I wonder that people freak out about it as much as they did in the 90s.
Well, they definitely didn't have armbands going.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't the media coverage that happened in the 90s. Because like the 90s, you had local news talking about it. You had CNN talking about it. And yeah, I remember the little flimsy armbands that came with the comic, all the different covers. Because you had the classic cover, and then you had the one that came in the black bag. You had the one that looked like a tombstone.
There was one like a tombstone?
The cover itself was all gray and looked almost engraved. The S shield and Earth's greatest hero printed on it. It was wild. It's also just wild that being a quote canon, because what is canon with imagination, but intended canon story in the 90s. I mean, the ripples were everywhere. It was all across DC Comics. It was even in Marvel Comics. There was actually in Night Stalkers, which some of you will recognize was a Midnight Suns title and was part of the supernatural revival that Marvel did in the 90s, because Ghost Rider had been doing well, so they did Midnight Suns, which brought titles like Spirits of Vengeance and Morbius the Living Vampire and Night Stalkers and The Darkhold. In Night Stalkers, around the time of the 90s death of Superman, at the end of one of the issues, the vampire or quasi-vampire character Hannibal King, in a little epilogue that's totally separate from the rest of the story, visits a grave that just describes as the passing of a great hero. And you see that Hannibal, cynical jerk that he is overcome with grief about the death of such a noble person. And it gives you little details on the tombstone that you realize it's meant to be Clark Kent. It's meant to be Superman. That this vampire in Marvel Comics somehow is also mourning Superman. And that was, 90s was huge. 60s didn't have quite the same ripple.
Nope. Well, and at the 60s, they very, very much upfront were like, could you imagine? Superman can't die, everyone. The end of the issue in question, it's very clear. This is an imaginary story. Superman will be back next time. It would never happen that he would actually die.
Never.
Never.
Never, ever.
Remember, if you like the clip, after you're done liking and subscribing, check out certainpov.com, where you can find more episodes of the show, as well as a ton of other great shows.